What's up, Jets fans? Welcome to the latest edition of Jets Latest, where you get the latest on the Jets, Jets. I'm your host, the spitting statistician Dane Martinez, and today we have to talk about what we saw in Baltimore as the Jets fall 23-10 against the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, at this point, the season really isn't about wins and losses, right? I know there's a lot of people out there in Jets Latest land that want the Jets to lose out to help their draft picks. And by the way, all the people out there in Jets Latest land, thank you for your helping me grow this channel, right? Watching these videos, liking these videos, commenting. I really love the Jets Latest regulars. And of course, if you want to become a Jets Latest insider, click on that join link at the bottom. You can get exclusive content, all sorts of other perks as we go throughout the 2025 season and beyond, right? And really, here on Jets Latest, if you subscribe, you would know that what I have been saying is the move to Tyrod Taylor, for example, was really so that we could evaluate some of the rest of the talent. And quite frankly, I was talking about seeing some of these young wide receivers. I was seeing what Breece Hall could do in the passing game when you have competent quarterback play. I was talking about what we look like when the defense and our field position game isn't compromised by bad quarterback play or throwing for less than 60 yards. And to be quite honest, I think we saw some of that at play today, even in a loss. Like, this was a close game for most of the game. We were hanging with the Ravens in Baltimore for most of this game, but one of the biggest takeaways is in our young wide receivers. I've been talking about Arian Smith, John Mechie, Adonai Mitchell, and Mason Taylor as guys who we have to learn about. And quite frankly, John Mechie look good, in my opinion. He is showing something with Tyrod Taylor there at quarterback. You see, he had 6 catches for 65 yards and a touchdown. He was Taylor's kind of most trusted target. He converted a bunch of first downs. You know, he made some nice catches. I thought we may have something here with John Mechie, and he's only 25 years old, okay? Adonai Mitchell had 7 targets, only secured 2 of them, did have a bigger play. You can see A.D. Mitchell kind of on the outside as a true X-wide receiver. We've talked about that here on Jets Latest. He is only 23 years old. And then even Mason Taylor had a few catches, right? Our second-round draft pick. I gotta tell you something. Mechie looked good underneath. It looks like in kind of slot, underneath slant kind of routes, Mechie could really be something. And honestly, that's what I mean. We gotta evaluate in the second half of the season. What if John Mechie, what if Mason Taylor can be legitimate pieces in this offense once we are fully formed and we drop the, new franchise quarterback in? I like that we were leveraging these guys, that they were getting opportunities, and that they, kind of showed up, in my opinion, for most of it. Mechie has to worry, he can get open. Mitchell, he can get open all the time. The question is, can he bring the ball in? But the leading receiver for the Jets against the Ravens was none other than running back Breece Hall. And this is something we talked about here on Jets Latest. I used this exact quote that was on the bottom when Aaron Glenn said it earlier in the week. He said, that's something we got to get better at. We got to make sure we target Breece a lot more. Well, Breece Hall led the Jets. He had 4 catches for 75 yards. Those 75 yards was a season high on only 4 targets. It's the 4th time this year he's had 4 or more catches. And there have been some explosive plays too. A 40-yard screen, right? A 15-yard play out of the backfield. This is what we want to see. We want to see if we have this element because, quite frankly, it looks like we do. They were talking about it all summer. Maybe now with a quarterback that can dump it off, that can check it down. You can see this and the kind of value that Breece Hall brings. And quite frankly, I think we have to sign Breece Hall in the offseason. Let's say Mechie could be a number 3 wide receiver. We know we have Garrett Wilson. We have a Mason Taylor. Maybe then wide receiver becomes a draft pick, a free agent signing, right, to build out this offense. But I think Mechie really showed himself. I think Breece Hall really showed himself in the past game. And the other thing that has been a staple for the Jets all year long, despite the fact that we lost 23-10, despite the fact that we fall to 2-9, despite the fact that we are a top 5 pick, once again, the special teams showed out. The field position is always something Aaron Glenn says he wants to play that field position game. That's part of the brand he wants to bring, and we continue to have weapons on special teams. The Jets were 4th in the NFL in terms of kickoff return going into this one, averaging 28.5 yards a kickoff return. They averaged over 31 today, okay? Williams had 4 returns that were all good. Kenny Nwanwu added to his league leading. He had a 34-yard kickoff return. That helps him maintain being the number 1 kickoff returner in the league. Austin McNamara on the other side pinned the Ravens inside the 20 3 times. He once again had not allowed any punt return yards on the day, and I think it was 4 punts. So as you can see, on the return side and on the punting side, we have the way to kind of use that as a benefit, use that as a plus for us in field position. And I think honestly, we didn't win the game, okay? And many Jets fans, like I said, may be happy as we continue to inch towards a top 5 pick, maybe a top 3 pick, because the Cleveland Browns won today. Those were one of the teams that were behind us. So we'll see how the dust settles at the end of the week with strength of schedule and all that stuff. But I saw elements that, if we're evaluating, look good. Specifically, Brees Hall in the passing game, like we've been talking about, and John Mechie might actually be something for us as maybe a slot wide receiver, as a third wide receiver. Him and Mitchell, they are both young. This is the kind of evaluation I want to see in this second half of the season. So I know we're not talking about moral victories, but even in a loss to a Baltimore Ravens team, I think there were things to celebrate there. And John Mechie was prime among them here in this loss to Baltimore. Let's see what some of you Jets latest regulars have to say. Mike Saunders, 9493, says, finally, a Jets YouTube content creator that mentions the fact that we may not draft a quarterback in the first round and take an O-lineman. This is what I was saying last week, right? He goes, I wouldn't mind drafting an offensive lineman and edge rusher in the first round. TJ Parker might slip. We don't need a receiver. He's talking about quarterbacks like Brissett. He said Lindenbaum should be our first target. I agree. Listen, I actually think there's going to be 4 top 40 and 45 picks the Jets are going to have. I think it is wide receiver, I think it is O-lineman, I think it is edge rusher, and I think it's something in the secondary, maybe a safety, maybe a corner. Depends on the Cisco. Do you want to go Cisco and more in the safety? But we got a lot of time to devote to that. But again, I think they're going to build out this roster, have it grow, and then drop the franchise quarterback on top. And we have 3 first-round picks in 2027. George Alston, 1933, says, I agree, Dane. It's Taylor time. We have to evaluate what we have as far as wide receiver and our young talent on defense. That's absolutely what we're talking about. And in that evaluation, if we discover that John Mechie can be our slot receiver at 25 years old, right? If we think that Adonai Mitchell is a project that's worth continuing to develop at 23 years old, who maybe is not the number 2, but can be a big-bodied X-wide receiver, then heck, Darren Muji, all praise to you. And we continue to trust him to identify talent in the draft. And then old Dave 1000 says, when I watch player interviews, when I watch Jet Production films, I get a very different and encouraging point of view of what's happening in the building. Players love AG and what he and Muji are trying to believe. They believe, and I believe, that this team is developing in the right structure. I'm with you, old Dave, and I think that development is part of what we have to see here in the second half. And Mechie, Mitchell, Mason Taylor, can they be, along with obviously Garrett Wilson next year, parts of a legitimate offense? We know we have a run game. We know we have pluses on special teams, right? We're going to be able to develop a defense. You got to think with Glenn and Wilkes. So we continue to move on. Despite the loss, there are some things to be encouraged about, and we will talk about it all week long here on Jets Latest. Moving up to another game that could be a winnable one. I don't know if you want to win or not against the Atlanta Falcons, but we'll talk about that all week. It is Thanksgiving week, so happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I may not be here every single day because of travel, because of the holidays, but we'll get you ready to be sure. You know what it is here on Jets Latest. We bring you the insight, the stats, the quotes, everything about the Jets, Jets. But if you also want to hear more from me, the spitting statistician Dane Martinez, remember, I am the host of the FTN Fantasy Show. We're getting to the end of the fantasy football season and into the playoffs, so if you need some help, you could always hit me up over there on SiriusXM. You could hit me up on social media at Spittin' Speeds, and FTN is a great website in terms of rankings, data, stats, matchups, edges, projections, all sorts of stuff there. Remember, we will be back to talk about what we are seeing in practice, the development, specifically the development for the future, which I think is going to be anchored by what we see at the wide receiver position and what we see out of this defense, right? Guys like Briggs, guys like Brownlee, guys like Stevens and A.Z. Thomas and their development, what we see out of J.J. and Will McDonald as a young tandem pass rushing crew. What can we see out of them? I will continue to be here to talk about it all week long on a holiday week. But for this episode's The Jets Latest, we out of here. Peace.